All right. Are we good up there? Okay. Well, welcome to your church, to the Lord's church. We're just happen to be the pew warmers and the hands and the feet and the servants here on this planet. And it's a blessing to be with you all. Blessing to be able to share with you this evening a little bit about our work. So I'm going to start with a short presentation on my family and what we do, and then I'm going to jump into a presentation regarding the Ecuadorian evangelist that you all support. His name is Sandro Ibadango. His presentation is all in Spanish. I haven't had time to fix the pictures or translate it or anything, so we're just going to go with what I got. But I wanted to have my computer up here so I could read it, so it's easier to read than trying to read that behind me or that one up there. Also, this gentleman right here is my uncle, Lyle Starnes. He came down from Deckard, Tennessee. I have a cousin that lives here. You met my cousin last spring, I think, Linda. You took the projector to her.
Ended up shipping it to a guy in Georgia, and he packed it up.
Oh, okay. I was trying to connect you with Linda, my cousin. Linda is his daughter. And you had a connection with this church, a former preacher from your church?
Tommy Rosenbaum.
Y'all know Tommy? Okay. So he knows Tommy pretty well, and so we came in this afternoon and visited with my cousin and her family, and my uncle and aunt were there. So I invited them to come over. So it's a blessing to have you here.
Thank you. May I explain to you why Shirley is not here?
If you want to.
I have a daughter who is critically ill with triple-negative breast cancer, very critically ill in Memphis. And my wife surprised me with they're going and leaving in just a few minutes. They're going to Memphis today.
Oh, okay. Well, good.
So I'm going home by myself, and I'll cry.
Okay. Before we start, Sean, would you mind starting us with a prayer? And remember my cousin Lisa in your prayer, please.
Be honored to.
Thank you.
Please. Our Father in heaven, we thank you for blessing us to this evening with this opportunity to gather together and hear more about the work that's going on around the world, especially in Ecuador. We thank you for all the blessings that you shower on us that allow us to be here, Father. We thank you for the hard work and the efforts that Rusty and his family and Sandro and his family do for the Lord's church. And Father, we thank you for all this, and we ask a special blessing for Lisa as she's going through this difficult time. We ask a special blessing for the whole family, for the whole Campbell family and Lyle's family as they go through this difficult time. We pray for safe travels to Memphis and back, and for healthy prognosis. Father, we ask that you go with us now and guide our hearts and our minds as we see your work being done in Ecuador. This is our prayer in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Sean. Okay. So where do I point? Back there? Or anywhere?
Should be.
Okay. So this is who we are, my family, my wife and I. Laura and I have been married now for almost 23 years. We've worked in Japan, we've worked in Portugal, we've been in Ecuador now 10 and a half years. The current ministry that we're doing, we've been at for over 9 years. I worked for the oldest Church of Christ in Mississippi for a couple of years. So we have quite a bit of experience. Laura was born and raised in Africa. Her parents were missionaries in Kenya. My oldest son, Alex, was born in Japan. Stephen was born in Michigan. Benjamin was born in Portugal. And Elizabeth was born in Ecuador. So we've gotten around, to say the least. And I was talking about moving again to Australia or someplace, and she's like, no, because I'm not having any more babies. So every time we move, we have a baby. So we run a Christian nonprofit organization called Camp Bellevue. Okay, and Camp Bellevue is sponsored by the Bellevue Church of Christ up in Seattle, outside of Seattle, Washington. But it is so much more than just a camp. People hear the word camp and they think, oh, church camp, and it is. But that's only a small portion of what we do. Yeah, and so I can't read that as well as I can read the one behind me. But there's kind of 3 prongs to our ministry, okay? We want to work and serve and bless our community where we are located in Ecuador. We're about an hour north of Quito. We want to serve and bless the Churches of Christ in Ecuador. This camp, this facility was built to bless the Churches of Christ in Ecuador. We do rent it out to other groups, but our main purpose there is the Churches of Christ. And then it's also to bless these partnerships and foster these partnerships like we're doing tonight with the Farley Church of Christ and the evangelist in Ecuador that you support, Sandro. Okay, and so we feel like those 3 areas are kind of the main prongs of our work and our ministry. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about how we serve our community. We do that in many different ways. We have an after-school program where we serve about 80 to 100 children in an after-school program. We help them with their homework. They get Bible teaching every day. They get a snack every day. And this is one of our biggest evangelistic outreach opportunities into our community. Okay? And so this is a big part of our ministry that goes from September to June. Oh, sorry. Let me go back there. We do a lot of medical campaigns, dental campaigns, and all these are for people in the community. Vacation Bible schools. We've had almost 200 children come to our vacation Bible schools. Most of the children in our community that we work with tend to be low income. They're not super, super poor. When you think of poverty and just the poor, destitute children you see on TV in different parts of the world, there's a little bit of that where we are, but most of them tend to be just around poverty line. They're not street kids, in other words. Okay. We do a lot of construction projects. If you wanted to come down and do a project down there, you've got some strong, able bodies that could do something, and we can get you going on different construction projects. We found, I have a picture of one here in a minute. People in their 70s, 80s, and 90s in the rural area where we are, they live in these mud brick homes. And the adobe is great material. It lasts longer than the new material they use, but the roofs are collapsing. And so we go in and replace a lot of these roofs on these buildings. We do some disaster relief. There was a big earthquake about 6 years ago that we did a lot of relief work for, and any other time we get an opportunity to do some relief work, we do. Benevolence, during COVID, there was a lot of people that weren't working, a lot of people that didn't have food, and so we tried to deliver food to people in the church and outside of the church as much as we could. And then everything that we do, we try to have some sort of an evangelistic bent to it. Okay? So we're not just doing good works, which is important because, the Bible says we're created for good works, right? But we also want to, how can they hear unless somebody opens their mouth and shares the word with them, right? And so we do that as well. Okay, how much time do I have? Maybe I should, as long as I want?
Yep, when people start walking out.
So I can talk a little slower? Do I need to talk a little slower for y'all down here? Okay. Okay, so talking about our community. These are kids in our after-school program that we work with. And, it's incredible to see how this program can influence the lives of these children. In this particular case, they were doing a STEM project. You're familiar with STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. Okay? You know what? We can use that to teach the gospel. And so they did some project there. I don't remember, windmills or something like that. These kids don't get these kinds of things in their school. And so when we can augment their education, they love it. And this particular young man right here, does this have a pointer on it? Okay. This young man right there in the middle with the white tank top on, his name is Stalin. Stalin, when he was about 11 years old, showed up to the camp completely drunk one day. He'd gotten into his dad's stash of beer and just helped himself. And he shows up completely inebriated as like 11-year-old boy. And we just told him, lay down, sleep, and then, of course, we contacted the parents and that kind of thing. Well, Stalin today, he's 17 years old or so, and he's now a very active young man in the youth group of the church. And so it's, God works in these kids' lives and takes them out of difficult situations and brings them to glorify God. So many of us have similar stories, I'm sure. We do all kinds of projects in our after-school program or the vacation Bible schools that we do. I mean, I've never seen a 3-person bag race. It's usually 2 people, but this time is a 3-person bag race, right? One time we rented a big foam cannon, and you see in the movies at the airports where the planes come in and they bring out the big foam cannon. Anyways, it was a big mountain of foam this tall, and I thought for sure we were going to find dead kids at the bottom of it when it dried up, but thankfully that didn't happen. But we just do all kinds of fun things with the kids. And then with the medical clinics, a lot of times what we do with the medical clinics is we'll partner with area-wide churches. Okay, so for example, Sandro's church, we've gone out there several times. That church is small, it's poor, they don't have medical people, but we can have teams come in from the States and we can take them out to serve that church. And these medical teams will come in and serve people in that community. And that church is responsible for doing any follow-up contact. Okay? So we're not necessarily doing all of that ourselves, but sometimes we collaborate with the churches in our area so that they can serve and bless their communities as well. And this young lady here actually just got married yesterday. She speaks Spanish, and she was praying with this woman that came to the clinic to get medical attention that day. And she's also helping her with her spiritual needs as well. So this last spring we had a couple of groups come down, one from Harding, one from the University of Tennessee, campus ministry connected with the University of Tennessee. That's who was in Chattanooga. And they came down and they did a vacation Bible school. You know how to say buffalo in Spanish? Buffalo. So I learned that. But that's what this is here. It's you can't see it as well. Can I cut these lights right here maybe? That would be helpful. But they came down, the Harding folks came down and helped with the VBS, and then they stayed on for a couple extra weeks and did a STEM camp, which was basically just another vacation Bible school. They used the story of creation to talk about science. And it was really cool to be able to make those connections. And here they are, this I don't even know what she's doing. She's putting Vaseline on a kid's nose so he can put a cotton ball and stick it to the... Do you remember what they were doing, dear?
They were putting cotton balls on the sheep on the wall over there.
Cotton balls on the sheep?
Yeah, everybody got a cotton ball with Vaseline. It was actually pretty hilarious.
Do you remember what the lesson was that day?
The lost sheep.
The lost sheep, okay. Very cool. And if you have questions at any time, just holler at me, okay? So I mentioned a few minutes ago these adobe mud brick houses that are old. The material is good, but the roofs are collapsing, and it's usually elderly people that live in these houses. And so we're able to go in with a team and replace the roof on that house in about a week.
How long do the roofs usually last in between?
So this house, I've got a guy that works for me. He told me he remembers when this house was built like 50 years ago. And we replaced this roof. This was probably taken about 5 years ago. So that was the original roof that was on there. So they last about 40 years or so, 40 to 50 years roughly. And we can replace that roof in about a week if we have enough people to do it. And if not, then I'll finish up with my workers as soon as we can. But we try to get it done while the group is there. The interesting thing about this is there on the left side, it's kind of hard to see, but there's a room, just an open room with no door, and that was the entryway to the house. Well, after they got a new roof on it, they decided, hey, we're going to close that off and we're going to put a nice door on it, and then they'll have a whole nother room in the house. And it was really cool to see that this giving them that little bit of help, they were able to come up with more help and improve their house even more. What was that? Oh, yeah. A little better. Okay. And we've done several of these in our community, and then we'll also go in and put in a cement floor in a lot of these houses. That's one of the best ways to eliminate diseases in some of these developing countries, is to have a sanitary floor in your home. And so you put in cement and get rid of all the dirt and the mud, and then you've just eliminated, the opportunity to get sick, or to get sick more often, perhaps. So this is some of the picture of us. This is actually a guy that works for me, and we're passing out food baskets to families in our children's program. So we really do work with these families a lot, and a lot of times when we want to do something in the community, it's with the families of the children that we work with. I had a missionary friend of my in-laws that worked in Africa for 30 or 40 years, I can't remember how long. And he said if he had to do it all over again, he'd focus more on the children, because it's easier to grow them into Christ than it is to convert them into Christ. Okay, so we talked about how we bless and serve our community. Now I want to talk a little bit about how we bless and serve the Churches of Christ in Ecuador. And we do that in a lot of the same ways, but some different ways as well. The summer camps for the children and the youth. Most of you have either been to summer camp or you've sent your kids to summer camp. And so we do some of that. Just edifying the local believers, either teaching and preaching and different things like that. Evangelism, like I said, almost everything we do has some sort of an evangelistic effort or bent to it. We've done English camp before, where a church group or a youth group comes down and we use the Let's Start Talking material to just have Bible studies in English with people that want to practice English. And so we can do that. We can do construction projects with groups that come down. The vacation Bible schools. I mean, there's so many different things that we can do. We had a dental team for the University of Tennessee. This is fascinating. Most of these folks were not Christians of any flavor. I mean, in fact, very few, if any, were from the Church of Christ. But they knew that they were coming down to work with us. And so they know that we're going to go and we're going to work with one of our churches that we work with, and they're okay with it. And they're not doing any of the evangelism. They're just getting their hands in people's mouths. It's the church that's doing the evangelism. And I get excited about that because God can use even non-Christians to spread His gospel to people. And that excites me. Yes?
Let's Start Talking, Mark Woodward.
Yes.
And all those. Have y'all had any working with World English Institute? Just curious about.
So Dick 80.
Dick 80.
So Laura and I.
Tom Langley does it mostly all now.
Yeah. Well, Laura and I are from the church in Oregon where Dick 80 served as an elder for many years. And so we have used World English Institute. We used it, personally when we worked in Japan. We haven't used it there, and that's mainly just because when we do things like that, it's the people that come down. So if you want to come down and use World English Institute, come on, we'll do it. We just, we're busy doing so many things that we don't do a lot of the English ministry, but we do use groups to come down and do the English ministry. And we used another program. Have you heard of the Story of Redemption film series? James Nord, he and I actually went to college together. We were lab mates in biology class. And he's put out this excellent film series called The Story of Redemption, where he'll go to different places of the world, including the Holy Lands, and film something and make biblical application there. So we've used that for an online English camp during the pandemic. And we've also been able to connect. We've done English camps online during the pandemic with folks here in the States, and we even had a team in Canada, and they were doing all of the stuff online via Zoom. So we can even do something like that, and that was exciting. Leadership development, equipping church planting teams. I do a lot of team dynamics stuff with leadership or church planting teams. I do a lot of personality stuff and.
Yeah, I'd like to connect with you later about that. Do you know about Church of Christ plants?
So there's several groups.
Yes, there's
Like there's.
This is out of Bill Stewart, who's now passed on to the Lord.
Uh-huh.
Started that. He's from Bear Valley, one of the faculty members. And all that. And so they go around doing countries where there is no congregation.
Yeah.
To come in and strengthen those who
Yeah, yeah.
similar.
And that'd be great. Like I said, I think we can use just about anything to spread the gospel. And so, Paul talked about how we become all things to all men, right? And I believe that's what we need to do is find ways to connect with the people where they are. And we can do that in so many ways. And then planting churches. So we've helped, Sandro as an example, helped in church plants in different places around the country of Ecuador. Actually, in this picture here, I want to talk about this picture. Sorry, am I moving around too much, Wesley? Okay. This for children's camp, Laura actually plans and organizes and directs children's camp for 8 to 12-year-olds. And one of the things she wanted to do was incorporate some sort of a service project. So the children come to camp, and while they're at Bible camp, they do a service project for the community or for a local church. And so this particular year, you see the elderly lady there holding that Afghan. We had suitcases of Afghans that came down from the ladies in the Bellevue Church of Christ that knitted? Is that? Crocheted. They crocheted the Afghans, and we had all these in storage, and Laura's like, let's take them down and pass them out to the old folks at the old folks' home. And so you can see this picture with the little girl, just the joy of the giver and the joy of the receiver. And it's just, that communicates so well what we try to do in our ministry. We do basketball camp. We've had several baptisms come from basketball camp. Again, we can use anything to teach the gospel. And so it's exciting to be able to do things that we enjoy, like basketball, and be able to use that as an evangelistic tool. In fact, this young man was baptized this year after basketball camp. And then the week after, the brothers from the Florida church came down and they baptized 10 kids. And then, just in the last, Guillermo, who works with me at the camp, he's baptized almost 25 people since the pandemic started. And one person he never met. He studied with them over the telephone. And then the day they showed up to get baptized was the first time he met him, So, and Sandro has baptized quite a few people since the pandemic started. So there's a lot of receptivity there.
How is Garmin doing?
He's doing well. I don't know, he just had surgery. I don't know if you saw that. He had a bowel obstruction, and then they had to remove a whole section of his intestines about the size of my arm. And that happened about a month and a half ago, but he's doing much better. So thank you. This is me, and then you can see Guillermo on the right there, the guy with the black shirt and the beard. And we were invited by my brother-in-law to go out and do a retreat for church planters, and we did some team dynamic stuff with them out in the jungle. And then one of the churches close to us, the Cayambe Church of Christ, was celebrating its 25th anniversary. And they're also funded, or one of the evangelists is sponsored by the Bellevue Church as well. And they asked me to come and preach for them on that Sunday. And so we do, as I said, we do a lot of teaching and preaching in some of the other churches in our area as well. And then the third thing I want to talk about, our ministry partnering with Churches of Christ in North America, hosting these short-term groups that come down. Y'all come down sometime. Bring people in your community. If they're not Christian, bring them. You can talk to them while they're there. We did a medical trip one year, and the doctor wanted to bring one of his coworkers who was Muslim. And I said, bring her. So he brought her with him. And she attended people medically, and at night, one of the guys in the group studied the Bible with her all week long at night. It was incredible. So we can be not just serving the people in Ecuador, but you never know. Those people that come with you are going to see how we as Christians should be living and serving, and who knows? You just never know. We've had a lot of young people come to Ecuador from the States and get baptized while they were there. Serving our community through the projects, I've talked about quite a bit of that already. And encouraging the relationships between the church plants and their U.S. supporters. Again, that's why we're here tonight, is to kind of help encourage your relationship with Sandro. And then we do a family mission trip every year. If only a couple of you wanted to come down, you can join in with other people that come down. You don't have to just get a group from your church to come. If you want to just join another group that's coming, that's fine too. We do a family mission trip every year. We've had 4-year-olds up to 87-year-olds come. So you'd still be within that bracket if you came down, Uncle. You can dig some. You can dig some ditches for me. Okay. And this here is an example. Is just a picture of our students that we had from Harding come down for a 3-week internship. They did the one VBS with the one group, then they did the other VBS using the STEM material that they brought. We got connected with an organization that makes these reusable menstrual kits for women and young ladies. And so the young ladies in this group got training on how to demonstrate this and pass it out and talk to it. And they did a lot of health education. We got invited to go into some of the schools and talk about sex ed. They even brought some lawyer friends to come in and talk about abuse and the ramifications of abuse, if you're the abuser or you're the abused. So we're able to do a lot of stuff down there that, and while they were there, promote the camp and promote the gospel. And those 3 people down on the bottom, are you familiar with AIM? It's connected with Sunset. Adventures in Mission. There's a sister program in Brazil, and so those 3 people down there at the bottom were actually AIM interns from the Brazilian program. So that was it. The 2 guys are actually Brazilian, and the young lady who's this tall is Ecuadorian, but she went to Brazil to participate in this program. And then my brother-in-law also works in Ecuador, and he was the director of the Quito School of Biblical Studies up until recently. He works a lot with church planning teams. I tend to work more with individuals like Sandro. They're not part of a team. But he invited us to go out to the jungle and help with a project out in a place called Xuxufindi. Say that fast 5 times. Xuxufindi. And so this was this team here that we got to do that with. These are the churches that support our family. If you're interested, there's the Bellevue Church in Washington is our sponsoring church. The Hillsborough Church in Nashville, Somerset in Pennsylvania, Livonia in Michigan, Hawley in Texas, Johnny Trail in Texas, Fort Walton Beach in Florida, and 2 churches up in Canada that just support our family personally. Okay, and then we have a church in Niceville, Florida that supports another Ecuadorian evangelist, and then there's a church here in Huntsville called Farley that supports another evangelist that we work with. And that's kind of the view from our property going towards Mount Cayambe, which is 19,000 feet. The camp itself is at 9,500 feet, and that's just looking across the valley. That mountain is, from base to peak, is the same size as Mount Hood, which is in Oregon, which is where he and I both were born and grew up. Okay, so I want to go ahead and jump to the next one. Any questions before we go on to Sandro made a presentation. I told you about that, so I wanted to share that with you guys. Any questions about our work? That I wanted to introduce us a little bit, so you guys kind of can familiarize yourself with us, so you know who you're partnering with to help Sandro.
Tell us again how long you've been doing this as a family.
So we've been married 22 and a half years, and then we moved to Japan for 3 years, and then just north of Tokyo in a city called Mito, M-I-T-O. We did that for 3 years. We taught English in a public school, but we also worked with the Mito Church of Christ for about 10 to 15 hours a week. And then I wanted some more education, so I went to Harding Graduate School of Theology in Memphis. And then while I was there, I worked for a church in the Thyatira Church of Christ in Mississippi for 2 years. And when I called up and asked about the job, I spaced. I didn't realize this was one of the 7 churches in Revelations, right? And I just spaced on that. And I'm like, how do you pronounce that? And the old brother there, he goes, well, just like they do in the Bible, Thyatira. That's the Greek. That's the original Greek. Did you know that? Thyatira. But it was a good experience. We did that for 2 years. We went back to Japan for a year. My mother, his sister, was diagnosed with a terminal brain tumor, so we had to go back to Oregon and take care of her. And then I hadn't finished my master's, so we went back to Memphis. And then we were raising support. We were actually on a mission team to Angola, Africa. And in 2008, the economy tanked. It was a really difficult time to fundraise. She was pregnant with our second son, so we went up to Michigan to live with my in-laws. And then my second son was born there. And then the Hillsborough Church picked up our sponsorship, and so we moved to Nashville for 6 months. And then we moved to Portugal for a couple of years to do language study, because that's what they speak in Angola. And then, long story short, instead of going to Angola, we ended up in Ecuador. So we've been in Ecuador now 10 and a half years, and I effectively speak Spanish with a Portuguese accent. I don't speak Spanish like a gringo. I speak with a Portuguese accent. Okay, so I have Sandro's presentation here on my computer, and his stuff is all in Spanish, and so I'm going to need this so that I can, I can translate. So it's easier for me to read this. That's why I've got this up here. Okay, so Sandro has been working with the Iglesia de Cristo Urguqui, the Church of Christ in Urguqui. It's about an hour and a half or so north of us, okay? And this is a new church plant that started a few years ago. Several of the people that started this church attended another church in Atuntaki, which is where Sandro's parents go, and Sandro worked there as well. But Atuntaki, for them to get a bus and go out there round trip, it was like 2.5, 3 hours every Sunday. And it was just time to start a church in their town, in Urguqui. And so that's where this is. Somebody donated land and some materials, and so they have a building. And we're going to talk a little bit more about the property, the documents. That's important to know. So the Church of Christ in Urguqui, and Sandro says here, Saludes en el nombre de nuestro Señor Jesucristo. So greetings in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ. And then he gives the direction of the church there. I'm not going to translate all that for you, but it's basically just the actual location of where the church building is, and then his cell phone number is down there. So if you want that, I'm happy to pass that all to you. Sean, I think, has it as well and can communicate directly with him if he wants to. So, detalles y trabajo que está realizando tanto espiritual y físico. So, details and work that we are doing, physical and spiritual. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm working two machines here. I'm a man. I can't multitask. I used to work at Starbucks, and you have to multitask in Starbucks. So I learned how to do some of that. Okay. So he's got a bunch of people's names listed here. These are families that are members of the church in Urguqui. Many of them he baptized, studied with and baptized. Okay. And, just like every church, there's problems. There's been infidelity, there's been unfaithfulness, there's been people that have left, new people that have come. Same story, different location. And so these are just all different people's names. Familia Ibadango Kishpi, Familia Vargas Tupizan. So I'm not going to read them all, but that's just people's names, members of the church. Okay, so our calendar of services, how the church functions, basically. So Sunday, they do a general culto worship service. They at 9 o'clock and 11. So they'll do a Bible study, and then they'll do worship service at 11. Okay. They do Miércoles and Wednesday. They have a Bible study for edification from 7 to 8 p.m. Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday, Saturday is strengthening the church and the church members, and then they have different evangelistic projects that are going on at different times. Okay. Some of the ministries at the church, they do a men's ministry, a women's ministry, youth ministry, children's ministry. They'll do physical manual labor. You have property, it requires some manual labor, especially if you're constructing it. And they do pretty much all the work themselves because they don't have money to hire somebody else. But Sandro himself is, I think he's a mason. I couldn't remember the word in English, but I think he's a mason. So before he went to the Bible college, he worked as a mason. So he's skilled in other areas, that's useful when you're constructing. I'm sorry? Like a brick mason, yeah.
He didn't mean Freemason.
No, not Freemason. Okay, so that first thing he says there, terminación del local y sus acabados por concluir. So they're in the process of finishing the building, And, it's one thing to put the structure up, but then you got to come in and put the lights in and the doors and the door handles and all that. So they have the structure, but there's still a lot of the little details that they're still working on. And then trazado del terreno para legalizar la escritura correspondiente que está en proceso por documentación. So getting the legal documents for the property. So it's in the church's name. I mean, that's kind of the big thing. And then the next thing goes along with that, trámites por conseguir. So persona jurídica, the person that's going to be the legal signer on that property. I imagine here, the church is the owner of the property, and the leaders or the elders of the church are the ones that can sign the paperwork to say whatever you need to do legally here, right? In Ecuador, it doesn't work that way. In Ecuador, you have to have one person that signs legally every document. And so for our work in ministry at Camp Bellevue, I'm that person, okay? However, if one of my workers, let's say they're driving one of the camp vehicles and they run over a kid and they kill the kid, who's going to go to jail? Possibly me, okay? Because I'm the legal signer of that ministry, and he's driving one of our vehicles. He's a representative of that ministry, okay? So that's kind of how that works there in Ecuador. It takes a lot of responsibility to be that individual, but, they're the ones that sign all the workers' contracts. They're the ones that can buy and sell vehicles, everything legal. That one person is that does everything. And so what happens a lot of time, and it's not the only country that does this, but if you get the wrong person in there, then all of a sudden, well, they feel like they control it all. And if you don't agree with them, then tough. I'm the legal representative and I can do what I want to do. We've seen this happen several times in Ecuador. And so it's a complicated thing. Anyways, all that to say, the church is working on this process, legalizing all the documents, but before they can legalize the documents, they have to have this legal representative in place. And I don't know who they're getting to do that. It's possible Sandro is doing that. I would advise against that, but I just don't know what they're doing. These are different things that are pending, or that they're in the process of doing. Finishing the lights in the walls, okay, inside and outside. They don't have a bathroom there, So if you've got extra missions money, I'm sure they could use some help putting in the bathroom. Y'all use the bathrooms here a lot, right? And it wouldn't look good if folks were going outside in the parking lot and behind the trees. And so, it's kind of an important thing. Class for children, a kitchen for fellowship, a baptistry. They don't have a baptistry there. That's kind of an important thing too. And you'll see in these pictures some of the places where they go to use a Baptist, to do baptisms. Okay, and that's what these next pictures are baptisms in 2022, okay? And along with the individual's name there, so Maura Gallieno. And there's the picture of her there in the water, and then there's a group picture there on the right. And that's in an irrigation canal, is where he's baptizing her. And that's actually Sandro there that's baptizing her. Francois Aguirre. It's just a young man there in the church, a youth, and again, in the irrigation canal. Patricia Rivera. It's hard to see, and I'm not sure if that's the irrigation canal, because there's a lot more water in there than there was in the irrigation canal. It could be at a river. It's there at nighttime. Ariana Ibadongo. This is his daughter, I'm pretty sure. She's 13 years old, I believe. And again, she's getting baptized there in the irrigation canal. Luis Valverde, again, there in the irrigation canal. We used to go swimming in the irrigation canal, so with cow manure all over, so it wasn't that big of a deal. But I was asked to baptize a guy one time, and the nearest water was a river, but it was muddy and murky. You couldn't see. Oh no, we can't do it there. We've got to go find clean, pure water somewhere, So we drove around for hours trying to find a place before we finally found someplace. Maikin Hernandez. That's in a fountain in one of the cities or towns there. I think actually in Urguki, that he's baptizing them in that fountain at nighttime. Javier Cotocachi, again in that same fountain during the day. Okay, and then there's some pictures of some of the activities. Of ladies' activities is what this is called. And this is actually the Harding students. I told you about these kits that they were demonstrating for these women. We went out there one afternoon and spent about an hour and a half or so there, and they gathered some of the ladies in the congregation and some of the ladies in the community and came together, and those ladies just demonstrated these kits, and they were like, man, they were so excited about these. I mean, some of these, not here, but in another location, a family of 6 girls, and one of the daughters has to use a colonoscopy bag. That, right. 12-year-old little girl has to use this, and $8.30 is the cheapest bag that you can get in Ecuador, and they last, if they're lucky, a day to 3 days. And this family is getting by. The dad works, but he's not full-time worker. He just, wherever he can find a job, he works. They're maybe getting by on minimum wage in Ecuador, which is $425 a month. And they've got the 6 girls, this one with the special needs. The oldest daughter has a baby who's also living in the house. So that family, these kits, saves them, every month women are spending $12, $10 to $15 a month on hygiene products. These kits are saving them a lot of money over the course of 3 or 4 years. That's how long they last if they take care of them. So there's a financial benefit, there's a health benefit. One of the girls here in this church was allergic to the disposable products. And so they were able to, this doesn't have chemicals in it, and she was allergic to those chemicals. And so the mother was super excited to be able to share this with her daughter. Yes?
In particular, are those kits something that, say like church groups, like our group of ladies, may want to put together kits here or there?
Absolutely. So that's, a lot of these kits come from,
Well, the organization is called Days for Girls.
yeah.
And they will train your group to how, there's a template and everything for how, it's not hard to do. It's like straight seams and stuff, but how to put these kits together.
Mm-hmm.
So there's different chapters all over the country that some are religiously affiliated, some are not. And
Right.
they get together, they sew, put the kits together, and then send
It's
them
called
off to
Day Kits for Girls is the organization.
Days for Girls.
Days for Girls, Days for Girls, yeah. Days for Girls, yeah.
And they have a very nice website with lots of good information
And you can-
about getting involved.
Right, and the ladies can get on there and go through it's like an hour and a half long training session where they can be trained to demonstrate the product. There's also training for men, so as men are, especially in developing countries, the men are the leaders in the community. And so to affect change and promote health, you often have to go through the men. And so it's important that we educate the men too. If you think about it, half the world menstruates, the other half live with the half that do. And so it's kind of this faux pas topic that we're uncomfortable talking about it, but we really shouldn't be, because it's a natural process that God designed, and so we should promote health, and we often have to encourage the men to be the ones to be the promoters, right? The interesting thing is here, my sister, who now lives in North Carolina, we won't talk much about my sister, but she's made very different life choices than I have. But her fiance, she's older than I am, her fiance died from COVID-related issues just over a year ago. And they invited me to come up and officiate the funeral. And anyways, at the funeral, one of his cousins came up to me. I have no idea. She doesn't go to a Church of Christ, but she goes to some church somewhere. I have no idea what kind of church it is. But she's like, oh, she's the one that told me about this. And I'm like, yes, I'm interested. And so anyways, their chapter send us hundreds of these kits, and there's chapters all over the country, and they send us hundreds of these kits, And again, we're able to use this material to promote health, physical hygiene, sexual health, but also we can use it to share the gospel with people too. And just bless the churches and the women in the churches that have needs. And so that's what these pictures are here of Laura and the girls in our group having a short time talking about the kids. They had a Bible study and a short devotional together. And then on the right, you can see several of the ladies there with their kids. It's kind of a neat thing that we got about 300 of those kits last spring, and we passed all but a couple of them out. And we have a waiting list of at least 100 more young women that would like to have these. And then the other part of your question is they can train a woman there in Ecuador to sew and make these kits, and then she can sell them for $15. And so now she has a business to where she's generating income, but she's also helping this other woman that, 1 month of what she normally costs can last her for 3 or 4 years. They do Bible studies on Wednesday. That's what this is here. They've invited. There we go. Yeah, he invites me to preach occasionally at the church. They do sport activities with the youth where they'll get other churches together and, just like we do here, try to have like youth rallies or youth events and different activities like that. And so they try and do the same thing there. And I don't know why every person in Ecuador throws an N on the end of my name. I don't understand why they do that.
It would be on there and it would be rusting.
Rusting, right. But rusty in Spanish is oxidado, oxidation or oxidized. And so,
Your name is Rusty.
so when we do kids camp, I come out and I'm oxidado and I do all kinds of crazy, silly stuff for the kids, and they all know me. All the kids in the Church of Christ in Ecuador know me as oxidado. But all the adults in the Church of Christ know me as rustin, and I don't know why it's rustin. Anyways, but that's me there in the picture. Doing I don't remember what the lesson was I was giving that day. But if you come down, any of you come down, come down, I'm going to ask you to teach and preach, and I'll translate for you if I need to, or if you got Spanish, great, or if Sean comes down, or any of you come down, just be prepared. I'm going to ask you to do that, and if you don't want to do it, it's fine. But you'll have an opportunity to do that, and I know the church would be blessed. Even if it's not your best lesson, they'll still be blessed. You can't hit a home run every time, I've learned. Sunday, I think this was actually a special. You can see on the wall there on the left, it says, Bien, I can't even read it. Bienvenido primero aniversario, I think is what it's supposed to say, but I think it's misspelled. It looks like it's misspelled. Aziversidria, what? I can't read it. It doesn't make sense. Anyways, but I think it's their 1-year anniversary from when they opened the doors of the church there. That's funny. I really think it's misspelled in Spanish. But, it goes along with Rustin coming for the adversity day, not the anniversary day. Communion, and we use communion for the Lord's Supper, but in Spanish, communion means fellowship. Okay? And a similar idea, but when you use the word comunión, it means fellowship and time together. And so this is time together with, just with church members, possibly other churches. I have a guy that works for me who Sandro often invites him to come and teach or preach there. My brother-in-law has gone out there occasionally and done something. This is their potluck preparation. They're in the, they're grilling, I don't know what they're grilling there, chicken maybe. But just right there in the wood, and it's not quite the same as here. They don't have the smoker on a trailer, right? And that's the church there. so it's growing. Before the pandemic, we felt like, like I said, Sandro and I kind of worked together in kind of a coaching, mentoring relationship, but really he's a great evangelist, and so our time together is more edification. I spend a lot of time asking him how he's doing personally. How is your spiritual walk with the Lord? How is your marriage? And so I focus on that and let him do what he's gifted at, which is evangelism.
It's good to hear that, and I meant to ask it early on as you had some of your credentials, initially, but you've worked with MRN?
Yes, a little bit.
Resource Network,
Yeah, we got a little bit of training through them. Yeah. And we are proactive about that. A lot of my missionary training comes from missionaries from Africa. Like, I like to sit at their feet and just listen to their stories, But yeah, I do have. I did a master's in ministry, and so my master's is more along the lines of church health, health of the minister, congregational studies, missions, a lot of missions. But I also did a lot of counseling. So I got part of the way through a marriage and family therapy degree, and then I realized I've got enough of my own issues. I don't want to listen to other people's problems. Right? And so I didn't finish that, but so I have a little training there, but I've also done a lot of coach training, and so I try to use that in these situations. Sandro's not the only Ecuadorian evangelist I work with. I've got a guy that works with us full time at the camp, and we're daily co-workers, but he's like the Paul or a Paul type personality. If I don't do anything good in Ecuador ever, I know I've invested into this man who has just an incredible evangelist and has a tremendous amount of potential, and so that's kind of God putting me in his life to help guide him to reach his potential. Sandro, but not quite in the same way, because I don't work with him side by side every day. Another young man, Christian, I don't know if you met Christian Kaiza down in Machachi, about an hour and a half south of Quito, similar kind of thing. And then Laura and I and some Ecuadorian brethren did a church plant in Quito about 10 years ago. And that church is in a really rough neighborhood of Quito, and we've had a hard time, generating leaders and stability in that church, and so we've got a guy there that we work with, and he's, it's almost the other way around. I'm not mentoring him; he's mentoring me. He's got 50 years experience in ministry or so, but we support him emotionally and financially and in other ways too. And then there's a young man in Brazil that I've kind of developed a coaching relationship with, who grew up in Ecuador, but now he works for the AIM program in Brazil. And he's young, has a young family, and so I'm able to kind of mentor him just through ministry challenges. How long have you been in ministry?
Started when I was 16.
How old are you now?
23.
Okay, so you have a few years. It's not always a cakewalk, and it's challenging. And sometimes you just get treated like dirt, when you're in ministry, and a lot of guys leave. There was a study years ago of 1,000 graduates from Bible college that were going into ministry. Within 5 years, 50% of them are out of ministry. Within 10 years, 90% of them are out of ministry. It's not easy. So my encouragement: take care of your preacher. It'll be good for you and good for him. Okay. Anyways, all that to say, I kind of feel like that's part of my job in Ecuador, is to kind of help support these guys emotionally and spiritually as they do ministry, because it's not always easy. I wouldn't change it, I heard, you know who Joe Betts was? Joe Betts was a missionary in Japan for about 50 years after World War II. I got to hear the last sermon he preached in Japan. And when people ask him, was it worth it? He said, anything else would be a waste of time. And that's kind of where I'm at, And there's a lot of great things in this world I could do, but for me personally, this is what I need to be doing. But it's not easy sometimes. It's a blessing, it's a joy. But as much as I love the church, sometimes the church doesn't love you, So it's just, you've got it. Your faith is in God. It has to be in the Lord above all else. Okay, so I'm sorry. Let me get off my soapbox. thankfulness. So he's saying we're thankful for the Church of Christ in Farley. He misspelled it. That's okay. Farley. He meant to say Farley. The Church of Christ in Uruguay is deeply thankful for your prayers and the support that you have given us. And then he has a passage here from 1 Chronicles 16:34. Let me read that to you. Let me just read that to you, because I'll butcher it if I translate that. I don't know whose Bible this was. It was just sitting here on the pew. 1 Chronicles 16:34. Oh, give thanks unto the Lord, for he is good, for his mercy endureth forever. Amen. And so, give thanks to the Lord because he is good, because always he is graceful, or merciful, is how I would translate that in Spanish. And then, sincerely, Sandro Franklin Ibadango Galieno, your servant, is how he finished that. And so that's the end of that. Okay. Any questions about any of that?
It's encouraging.
Yes.
I do with Sandra, we talked last month maybe. He's trying to get so originally the goal was he's going to be self-supporting after a period of time.
Mm-hmm.
I know we've gone through some rough time with the pandemic.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
he's starting his own business now.
So he wants to start his own business. It requires a good bit of capital investment. And I don't give him any promises when it comes to money. One of the challenges we've seen in missions is when the locals get dependent on the outside support, and we want to support them, encourage them, but at the other hand, we want to kind of avoid that permanent dependency. And I don't know what the easy answer there is, but trying to encourage him, and we've told him if he needs extra money, he needs to go out and get a job or do some construction work. I think he started driving as a taxi a little bit, his car, to generate a little bit of extra income. But on the and that's a hard balance to find, because the more of that kind of work you're doing, the less evangelistic work you can do. And so trying to find that balance is a challenge. Before the pandemic, I was about to say this a minute ago. Before the pandemic, the church in Uruguay, we felt like was ready to stand on its own 2 feet, and Sandro was in the process of stepping out, and then the pandemic hit. And one of the original purposes for Farley to support him was to plant a church in another town called Cotocachi. And because of the pandemic, that kind of shot that out of the water. And then just like here in the States, pandemic has also been hard for many of our churches, and people have left the churches, right? And so, he wanted to stay there and try and collect the flock and keep, encouraging the church and encouraging the church. And you can see in that picture, the church is it's not super huge. Uruguay is a town of, I would say, probably 10,000 people or so. But it's the church is there and it's growing. And I think he's probably ready to move on to Cotocachi now. So during the pandemic, it's interesting. Just like here, every church handled it differently, right? This church, because they're rural and these people get sick all the time anywhere, their mentality was, it doesn't make a difference, we get sick all the time, so they just kept meeting, whereas other churches only met virtually, like the church we normally work with, they met virtually for, I don't know, a year and a half before they started going back to in-person worship, But these people don't know how to use technology, and so Sandro was like, we're going to get them together, and their mentality is we'll get sick from whatever, anytime, anywhere, so it doesn't really make any difference to them. So, but yeah. Any other questions? I do have something to give you from Sandro. Boys, I gave one of you an envelope. There was an envelope, a white envelope, about this big. You put it in the bag? Yes, thank you. Okay. And Laura, would you mind taking a picture of this so I can share this